I spent an entire year working through LSAT prep textbooks and doing dozens of practice tests, but my scores would not go up. I was willing to work hard, but I wasn't working smart. Now today, there are roughly 60 exams in the new format without logic games, and there's this big temptation among test takers to churn and burn through that practice material. And so I'm going to share with you today how you can put in less work and get a higher LSAT score. You don't need to put in 6-7 hours a day, which is a recipe for burnout. You can instead do maybe as little as 2 hours a day and get the same results if you change the nature of what your LSAT prep looks like. Rather than taking a practice test every single day or even every other day, you could instead do fewer exams, maybe one practice test a week, and review it in depth. This came to be my LSAT formula for studying towards the later stages of my prep. At first, I was taking an exam a day. I started dialing it back to 3 a week, then 2 a week, then 1 a week, and that ended up being enough. Of course, you want to work through a ton of practice questions. You want to ideally do thousands of them if possible, because it takes time to see the patterns, but putting in too much time is not going to get you the results because it's going to fry your brain. You're going to be so frustrated. You're going to be sick of looking at questions. At least that's how it was for me, where my scores plateaued and then dropped, not because I didn't understand the material, but because I had looked at it for so long, it started to look like gibberish, even though in a more relaxed state, I was able to easily navigate those questions. Now, are you going to be able to do it in just a month or two? Maybe not. It might take 3 to 4 months, but you can get there in the end if you work at a slower pace. So you have two options here. You can cram it all in just 2 months between, say, now in August or now in September, or you can spread it out over a longer period of time, giving yourself more time to review questions in depth and spread those exams over weeks instead of days. Now, whether you're studying for the LSAT full-time and have no other obligations, or you're working full-time and doing LSAT prep on the side, either way, 1 or 2 exams a week might be the way to go. The key is that you've got to review those questions in depth, figuring out exactly what's leading you astray about a question. It's not enough to take a practice test, look at what you got wrong, Google explanations, and then go on to the next practice test. Instead, you do one exam, you look at every single question you got wrong and every single question that you had difficulty with, and try to determine why you got it wrong or why you had difficulty with it. In logical reasoning, for example, your mistake could have come from the question stem, maybe not properly identifying what question type you were dealing with, but more likely it will be that you didn't fully understand the argument itself, the stimulus. So you want to make sure, first and foremost, do I actually understand the argument in front of me? Do I actually understand the method of reasoning in the stimulus? Maybe LSAC did not include key indicator words referring to evidence and conclusion, or to necessary and sufficient conditions. Maybe this argument had a sub-conclusion. Maybe they included a counter premise, and so there was all this extra stuff to navigate, and that threw me off. Or maybe it was something in the answer choices. Maybe it was a tempting wrong answer that threw you off, or maybe it was an unappealing right answer that, of course, did not seem appealing to you. And so you want to figure out which tricks and traps on the LSAT you personally are uniquely prone to falling for, so that you can avoid making the same mistake again. To most students, hard work involves taking practice tests, and reviewing like this doesn't even factor into the equation. Instead, I'm suggesting that we narrow our focus to the most difficult questions you encountered, or the ones where you guessed and got lucky, but it could have gone the other way. Most students don't even think of engaging in this kind of review process, and so this is a different kind of hard work. It isn't a timed sitting, it's not testing your endurance in a context of a practice test, but this work is in some ways more taxing because you are coming face to face with the errors in your previous approach, in your previous method of reasoning. But this is the real work, because until you know which tricks and traps you personally are uniquely prone to falling for, you are, of course, likely to make the same mistakes again. So, am I asking you to do all 60 exams? Ideally, yes, if you have a longer timeline that supports this. If you're doing 2 exams a week, that would take roughly 30 weeks, which is about 7 months. If you were doing 1 exam a week, it would take you over an entire year. So maybe what you're going to do is you're going to do half of the exams, namely the newer half, exams 129 to 158 or so, and then you'll go through those questions in more depth. Better to do fewer exams and go into more depth than to do a larger number and only scratch the surface. So maybe you'll do 2 exams a week for 15 weeks, covering 30 exams in excruciating detail. You will know those questions inside and out so that when test day comes around, there will be nothing you haven't seen before. Now, imagine how much better this would be than doing all 60 exams in the new format, but only getting a surface level understanding of the tricks and traps contained within those questions. Now, this approach to the review process that I call the Socratic review method is a cornerstone of my LSAT prep courses and my one-on-one coaching programs. If you are interested in finding out more, you can check out the links below this video to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out. Now, why do I focus so much on reviewing logical reasoning questions in particular? It's because in the new LSAT format, logical reasoning is 2/3 of the test. Without logic games, LSAT replaced that section with a second scored logical reasoning section. And so the benefit to you here with the new format starting in August and beyond is that there is less material to study, and any gains you make in your understanding of logical reasoning will be doubled across the 2 sections. Now, I'm not saying to neglect reading comp. Of course, you want to cover reading comp as well. But the good news is that logical reasoning and reading comp contain a lot of crossover. What works for logical reasoning will oftentimes work for reading comprehension as well. But because logical reasoning has so many different types of questions, I recommend starting off with that to begin with, and then reading comp will be that much easier. Anyway, folks, that's all for now. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.